It was a warm September night in 2013 when I spotted the full moon as I drove along a deserted road. The thick fog that had blanketed the city was no match for my headlights. After a long shift at the hospital, I was eager to unwind with a quiet evening at home. However, fate had different plans for me. As I approached a bend in the road, I noticed two vehicles pulled over to the side, illuminated by a nearby street light. A man was being held at gunpoint by another man, and the victim was pleading for mercy. The perpetrator was adamant about getting his hands on money and valuables. At first, neither of them noticed my presence, perhaps due to the commotion. As I watched in horror, my hands started shaking on the steering wheel. I realized I was witnessing a crime in progress and knew that I had to act fast. I quickly drove my car to a dark area of the road, while still keeping an eye on the unfolding events. Fumbling for my phone in my pocket, I dropped it on the car floor, and without looking away, I searched for it. Once I found it, I dialed 911, hoping that help would arrive soon. Suddenly, the gunman turned towards me, and I realized that I had been mistaken in thinking that I was well hidden by the darkness. With my heart racing, I stepped on the accelerator and drove away as fast as I could, hoping that the gunman wouldn't follow me. For several minutes, I drove with my hands trembling on the steering wheel, replaying the shocking events in my mind. When I finally pulled over to the side of the road, my phone rang. It was the police, but I had been too preoccupied to notice how long they had been waiting on the line. I answered the phone, still catching my breath, and heard the officers say that help was on the way. Relieved that I had done the right thing by calling for help, I hung up the phone. However, my relief was short-lived as I noticed a car pulling up behind me. At first, I thought it might be the gunman's car, as it resembled one of the cars that I had seen earlier. But upon closer inspection, I realized that it was just another driver, probably curious about the commotion. As the minutes passed by, I began to feel uneasy. The driver of the other car had gotten out and was pacing behind his vehicle, as if waiting for something. My instincts told me that something wasn't right, and I started to think that maybe it was the gunman after all. I quickly locked my doors and kept a close eye on him, ready to act if necessary. As I was about to call the police again, I saw flashing lights in the distance, and I felt relieved that the cavalry had finally arrived. 2 squad cars pulled up behind me, and the other driver didn't leave. I figured that if he were the gunman, he would have split by now, so I felt a little more relaxed. But if he wasn't the gunman, then who was he? One of the officers approached my car, and we spoke for a few minutes about what had happened. He told me to stay in my car and walked away, and both officers approached the other driver, who had stopped pacing and was now standing silently by his car. I watched through my rearview mirror as both police officers approached him. Suddenly, the driver bolted and ran into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. The police officers chased after him, but he was too quick and too elusive. For several hours, the police searched the area for the driver, combing through the woods and checking nearby houses, but he had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only more questions. The next day, I received a call from the police telling me that they had identified the driver and that he had a long criminal history. They thanked me for calling in the crime and for being observant, which had helped them catch a dangerous criminal. His behavior was still really confusing to me. What was he thinking following me to that spot, and why wouldn't he take off as soon as the police arrived? Maybe he was on something, or maybe he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened that night. I knew that I had done the right thing by calling the police, but I also knew that I had put myself in danger by getting involved at all. Despite the risks, I would do it all over again. It was a no-brainer, really. What would you do if you saw someone being robbed in plain sight? I have been a taxi driver for more than a decade now, and in my line of work, I've witnessed everything from boisterous and intoxicated passengers to reserved and introverted ones. However, nothing could have prepared me for the night when I picked up a passenger who would alter the course of my life forever. It was a frigid evening, the kind that makes you want to snuggle under the covers and stay home. But I had to heed the call of duty and work. I was driving my taxi around the city, scouting for my next fare, when I spotted him standing on the corner. He was a tall man, dressed in a somber suit, and his hands were tucked in his pockets. He removed one hand and signaled for me to pull over. He entered the vehicle through the back door and shut it behind him. I could tell that he was anxious as he glanced around the car, as if searching for something. I greeted him, and he responded with a nod. "Where to?" I asked, and he gave me an address on the other side of town. I put the car in gear and set off. To break the ice, I attempted to make small talk, but he only replied briefly and distantly. As we drove, he suddenly changed his mind and requested that I take him to a different address. I complied, and we drove through a dimly lit and abandoned street. He then asked me to stop in front of an old building, which appeared to be deserted, and I hesitated for a moment. However, he assured me that it was safe. When we parked the car, he alighted and instructed me to wait for him. I observed him approaching a man on the street, and they exchanged a few words. The other man was intimidating, with a shaved head and numerous tattoos, which was a sharp contrast to my passenger, who looked like a well-groomed businessman. As I was preparing to drive away, my passenger returned to the car with a daunting-looking man in tow. Both of them climbed into the back seat, and my passenger directed me to drive. Despite feeling uneasy about the situation, I complied with their orders. As we drove, the two men spoke in hushed tones, and I could barely make out what they were saying. However, I had a nagging suspicion that they were planning to commit a crime, and my heart started to race. I knew I had to act quickly to protect myself. While the smartest course of action might have been to carry out their plans and then contact the authorities, I realized that there was a police station just a few blocks away. In a moment of decision, I turned off the planned route and accelerated towards the station. Suddenly, my passenger produced a gun and aimed it at me. "Don't even think about it," he warned. "Keep driving." By then, it was too late, and we were pulling up in front of the police station. As soon as I came to a stop, the two men bolted out of the car and ran away. I was in shock, and my heart was still pounding. After regaining my composure, I went into the station and recounted what had just happened to the police. Although I didn't know what their plan was, one of the men had pulled a gun on me. I did my best to describe their appearance, and later learned that they had been caught on the station's security cameras. The following day, the police contacted me and asked me to come to the station for an interview. They had apprehended the two men and wanted me to identify them. Upon arriving at the police station, I was presented with a lineup of suspects. As soon as I saw my passenger, I immediately recognized him and pointed him out to the authorities. They took him into custody and charged him with attempted robbery and assault. The intimidating man who had accompanied him was also apprehended, and the police discovered a weapon on him that connected him to other crimes. I felt relieved knowing that these dangerous individuals were now behind bars and unable to cause any further harm. As time went on, the memory of that terrifying night began to fade, and I resumed my daily routine. Although I've had some other harrowing experiences throughout my years as a taxi driver, perhaps I'll share those stories another time. However, without a doubt, this was the most frightening experience I've ever had. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, my family embarked on a trip to Florida to visit my grandparents. They resided in a quaint town situated right by the Gulf of Mexico, where the weather was balmy and the beaches were breathtaking. I always eagerly anticipated these vacations, as I hailed from the north, where the weather was dreary throughout the year. Our customary time of visit was March, coinciding with my brother's and my school break. We would set off early in the morning, even before the sun rose. My father drove the car for the majority of the journey, while my mother would take over occasionally to provide him with some respite. The trip was long, and we would cover it in one go, with my father driving through the night. We would halt intermittently to stretch our legs and grab a bite to eat, During one such pit stop at McDonald's, a man in the queue started bellowing at my dad, accusing him of cutting the line. Despite my father's explanation, the man refused to listen, and my mother's attempts to pacify him were unsuccessful. I recall feeling apprehensive and wanting to conceal myself, but my father kept his cool and didn't react to the man's hostility. Once we finished our meal, we resumed our journey, only to realize that the same man from McDonald's was tailing us. We ignored him initially, hoping that he would divert elsewhere, but he continued to pursue us. Observing him through the rear window, I felt an intense fear gnawing at me. My mother asked my father for advice, and he instructed her to disregard him, claiming that the offender would soon lose interest. Abruptly, he crashed into our vehicle from behind, causing us to swerve. My brother began to sob, and my parents promptly realized that we needed to summon the police. My mother dialed 911 and relayed the situation to the operator calmly, even though I knew she was struggling to maintain her composure for the sake of my brother and me. Within minutes, we could hear sirens blaring and spotted a police car speeding towards us from behind. We pulled over to the side of the road, and the other car drove on while the police car pursued it. As we waited, another police vehicle pulled up behind us, and an officer approached our car. He informed us that the man had been apprehended. We learned that he had been drinking and had a history of violent behavior, having already been on probation. After evaluating the damage to our car, my father decided to proceed with our trip. Although the bumper had a significant dent from the collision, the police confirmed that it was safe. The rest of our holiday was filled with fun and laughter as we relished the Florida sunshine, indulged in delicious seafood, and explored the quaint town where my grandparents resided. On our way back home, I contemplated how fortunate we were to have escaped that situation. Accidents are commonplace on highways, and that man could have easily driven us off the road. Fortunately, that did not happen. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.